Hi everyone, I just wanted to make a quick video going over some of the slides for our presentation this week. So basically, this slide right here is going to give you a formula that you could potentially fill in to help you write your thesis statement. Of course, you can go ahead and revise it if you want, but this is going to be an example that will have all of the information that you need to make sure you have in your thesis statement. So you want to make sure you have the title in there, author, and the thesis of the text that you're analyzing. So first of all, you could honestly just fill in the blanks here. Then this is the title of your documentary or podcast. This is the name of the person who created the documentary or the organization who did this. A lot of times is the director. And then you would want to make sure that you have some sort of evaluation here. Do they make an effective argument? Do you think it's persuasive? Um, just something to kind of think about. Think about what is the argument they're trying to make, and do you think it is persuasive? And then the reworded thesis here is going to be, what is the thesis of the text you're analyzing? A lot of people come to me and say, I don't think that this documentary has an argument. It's just informative. Just kind of keep in mind that even documentaries, when they're sharing facts, that is still an argument, okay? If you think about, we just talked about logos. When people are sharing facts with you, it's still rhetorical because they are selecting certain facts to share with you. In other words, if you're learning about the People's Temple, for example, there's lots of different documentaries on the People's Temple. And if they were each of them sharing just a completely neutral, unbiased perspective of that, then there probably wouldn't be a need for there to be so many of them, right? But each of those documentaries is going to probably focus a little bit differently on aspects of that cult. And so you want to figure out what is it that's specific about the argument or that's specific about the information included in this documentary. Maybe they're focusing more on Jim Jones. Maybe they're focusing more on the survivors of the cult. Maybe they're focusing more on the rhetoric that the cult used, for example. You want to kind of figure out what it was that the documentary is focusing on. That's going to probably be its thesis. Some documentaries are going to have a more directly stated thesis, and wonderful. But if you're worried that you don't know what the argument of the documentary or podcast is, take a step back and say, okay, wait, what is the main thing that I like that they seem to be talking about? That's going to be their argument, is whatever the angle is that they're taking, okay? This last part here is this unique quality. And what you basically want to be thinking about for unique quality is, what is it that's most notable to you about the documentary and the way that it's making an argument? Again, it might have something to do with the fact that they're focusing on survivors. Maybe they have a lot of interviews with survivors. Maybe they have a lot of video footage. Maybe they have a longer lens focusing on the history leading up to this event. So just kind of think about it. What is unique about the documentary? Okay. So then I have another slide here, which is going to show you the different types of structures that you could use for this paper. Most people are going to use a topical structure for the paper, and that's because a rhetorical analysis is already, what analysis do is they take something and break it up into parts to understand how the whole works, right? And so with a rhetorical analysis, we're taking an argument apart to figure out how the argument works. And so we're breaking it up into these parts that Aristotle told us were important to know: kairos, ethos, logos, and pathos. And so you could have a different section on each of those rhetorical appeals, just kind of going through what are the different appeals that you notice as you were watching the documentary, like we did for our assignment last week. Your introduction is going to have a hook, it's going to have your thesis, and it's going to have a really brief description of what it is that you're talking about, the topic. Summary is going to go into more detail. And here, what we're usually going to do is talk about the documentary itself, what happens in the documentary or in the podcast. And you're going to want to say, like, it starts with this, then this happens, usually. Sometimes you'll have stuff like parts that the documentary has. It's not so narrative, right? And in that case, you could say the documentary has a lot of interviews with these people. It shows footage from this, and so you can break it up into kind of what is going on in the documentary. Okay, so that's summary. Context is going to be your history paragraph. Okay, so here you're going to talk about what the history of the circumstances are that the documentary is covering, right? So like, what cult is it covering? When was the cult founded? Who was the leader of the cult? How did things go as time went on? So that's going to be your context paragraph. Kairos, ethos, logos, pathos, and then a conclusion, right? Alternatively, you can use a chronological organization structure. And basically the difference here is that instead of breaking things down and looking at the rhetorical parts, you're going to be breaking the movie down into scenes and then breaking down each scene to look at the different rhetorical parts of that scene. The organization here is really different. But basically, the goal of this, um, would be to focus more on the text itself. One of the problems with this is that usually a lot of students, when they are doing chronological organization, they tend to get distracted by the content of the documentary. And so in other words, they're like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this thing about the People's Temple. It's exciting. They just want to keep writing about that. Topical style can really help you focus on the rhetorical appeals. Make sure that you're not kind of drifting off into different areas, okay? But chronological can be great too, because here you're not giving your reader a quick summary. You're really helping them understand the narrative more totally, like more as a whole, and then you're giving them, analysis throughout. And so that can be great. It's just a little bit more challenging. Finally, there is this other consideration for a structure, and that is if you want to break it down even further into looking at like different modes of communication. So, for example, you could talk about like visual visual elements of the documentary and how those are rhetorical, verbal elements, spoken and written word, and how those are rhetorical. That's another option for you. This is going to have a really similar structure to the topical organization, and it's sometimes a great way of kind of breaking up the paper and giving you more ideas about things to include. So hopefully this was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions, and good luck as you're finding your text this week for your essay.